Welcome to this next session of the ACMHangouts hosted by Arts Council Malta. Today we are going to be discussing the value of art and the pricing of artworks, of performances, etc. Here are some more details. Setting a price to art can be somewhat challenging and is not always very straightforward. There are a number of risks involved for the audience or buyers and for the artists themselves, based on subjectivity and the level of unpredictability. In this session, we are discussing those factors which determine the value for different art forms, pricing, the responsibility of artists and audiences in relation to keeping a certain standard, and creating a fair environment for artists to work in. Joining us for this first part of the session are Rachel Blackburn, Head of Culture at APS Bank, and Melanie Erixxon, Curator, Collector and Founder of Art Swevin. Welcome to the session. So, Melanie, from your perspective, from your experience in the visual arts sector, what are those factors which give value to artworks? How is value determined?
There are quite some aspects that one needs to take into consideration. For example, the artist's experience and number of exhibitions, if he has any works which belong to a museum or belong to, let's say, famous collections, private collections. And also, it's nowadays, unfortunately, what also is happening with auctions, that some artworks are being sold at astronomical prices, and unfortunately, this is decreasing the meaning of the value in the sense that most people don't even bother to see what the artwork is about, the meaning behind it, but everyone is just talking about the sensational price tag that it's sold for.
Yes. So basically these factors are kind of challenging what you mentioned, what determines the artistic value, right, of these.
Also, so nowadays it's mostly about branding as well a lot. So it could be a superstar artist, a superstar dealer or gallery, and a superstar auction house. So mostly it's marketing and also what sensation is surrounding the artist and the artwork, and this of course affects the value. And also some collectors end up buying artworks that they don't even see, but just because of the sensation that the artist is generating around him.
Yes, all that hype.
Yes,
it's kind of reflecting a little bit our times in a way, and
yes,
what is
it's all
happening on
a
social
brand
media.
in the end.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. So, Rachel, from your perspective as part of a corporate setup, what is driving you towards investing in the arts? What is the value that you see in the arts?
It's crucial for us. I mean, as a bank, our vision is to be the community bank in Malta, and it's very interesting to hear what Melanie has to say, because for us it's all about alignment with our purpose. It's quite the contrary. So we look for alignment with our corporate values, and we don't actually commission works, but artists and performers come to us with proposals, and then we go through a rigorous evaluation procedure to look at how it aligns and how best to fairly distribute our support to different projects and initiatives.
Okay. Now, in terms of valuing the arts per se, right? So determining the price. Melanie, who does that? And the fact that perhaps there are no clear parameters in this case that you can decide, prices are decided upon quite freely. Is that liberating, or is it sometimes what is driving the arts market a bit crazy?
Well, some artists already know their prices, and they will not let anyone take any different decision about their prices. Then there are other artists who ask a curator to help determine a price range for their works. So one way to do it, one easy way, is to compare to a similar artist with similar works and determine a price range from there. And also another way is that the artist should put an artwork for auction and see how the market reacts to it. Can be a new artist to see, even though he is unknown, to see the reaction towards his work. And for already established artists, this can be a point to see if he can raise the value of his works. Normally, after a successful exhibition, for his next exhibition, the artist is, it's assumed that he or she will raise the prices, because that's also what gives the artwork an investment value, because if I bought from the previous exhibition, now I know that the artwork I bought, it's already increasing in price. Then another way of pricing, which I don't think it's done or ever done in Malta so far, is what is called live or die pricing. This is something that an emerging artist would exhibit their first exhibition. The prices would be extremely high. A case in point is Jenny Saville. She had done her first exhibition. She had 6 works, and they were priced at 100K, around 100K each, and they sold out. So for her, it was a, let's say,
success story.
Yes, but of course, that's why it's called live or die, because then if it doesn't work out, it's and it would be hard for the artist also to find someone who want to represent him, because the reputation is quite damaged.
But are there any dangers there in terms of like artists deciding prices themselves? In this case, like it's literally a live or die situation. So what would you think of these, like these random prices or these random decisions?
I think, unfortunately, they would learn the hard way, in the sense that if the prices are too high, normally the works will not sell. So that's one indicator. And also another problem will arise, because if they are being represented by a gallery, the gallery will advise the prices.
That's the purpose of being part
and that's
of
why
a gallery.
Yes, and also a gallerist, if they are representing the artist for the next exhibition, they should never lower the price range of the artist. The only case where it can happen is if the artist, for example, normally works in oils, and now he's experimenting in watercolors, so it's a totally different body of works, then you would expect to have a lower price on those new works, because it's a phase of experimentation, and that's fine. But the dealer, the gallery, should never reduce the values of similar works that I've already sold, because then it will cause problems with the collectors who are investing on that artist.
And just out of curiosity, did COVID affect prices or the market, or did you like it
not
stayed?
at all. Actually, in the positive way, I think, because first of all, when I speak to artists, lots of artists continued selling a lot during COVID. As soon as exhibitions started again, there was thirst for buying art. People did not travel, so they saved money and they invested a lot on art, especially when people realized that spending so much time at home, you need, to surround yourself with something, let's say, aesthetically beautiful or something that gives you something.
Yep.
So I think it helped a lot to generate interest in buying art.
That's very interesting. Rachel, from your end, as we discussed right before the session, in this case, APS is taking a very particular role in the creative ecology, because it is in a context which is largely dominated by public institutions and setups and very few private initiatives. Yours, as a corporate setup, is investing in the art and is promoting particular platforms that empower, that encourage artists. So how do you feel vis-a-vis this responsibility, and how do you go about setting parameters for artworks or performances that you support? Do you commission these? Do you support these? How do you go about that?
So, as we were saying, we respond, and we respond in different ways. So we were just mentioning COVID. We had the APS Arts Festival, the summer festival. We had 2 iterations during the pandemic, and that was done in response to a need. Because of the social the context that we found ourselves in terms of health and safety, as you were mentioning, there was a real thirst for the experience, the performances, arts, and being able to attend events, and not only for entertainment. The feedback we got, there was this deep need for it. So we decided to go for that. I mean, obviously, it wasn't something easy at all, both versions, and we're now in the process of planning the third. But we've learned a lot, and we know from the feedback that we received from the artists what it really meant both to the artists, to the audiences, and as you mentioned, in the ecosystem, because when you support an artist, you support so many other people.
Exactly.
It's a whole sector, a whole industry. So it's not about your return on investment, but your return on community and the network effect of what that investment will render.
And kind of that's where you see the value there, the return on the
Absolutely.
community, which is kind of in line with what you said. So if you had to kind of describe the definition of successful on this level, right? Because you respond to the artist's needs, which is great, but at the same time you have your own needs. So you did mention your priorities earlier, but what are those factors that you say, this is why we are doing this, this is what
Definitely.
made it successful?
For us, it's a way of communicating, as I said, to be the community bank in Malta. So when we talk about our purpose, when we look at our values, and even as we mentioned in the selection process, for artists it's very difficult. Our 5 corporate values are excellence and authenticity, passion, inclusiveness, and being contemporary. So it's very difficult for most artists not to feel that they can be part of that message. So this is what we look for. We are successful when we have supported, when we have delivered against our values, and the attendance at the end of the day, that there's been a response, and then the knock-on effect of all of that.
So you
we
are
were able
seeing
to
kind of
meet.
the effect is not just in terms of the festival and artists being supported, but there's also the part where audience is being encouraged to come to something which you are supporting, right? So that
Most
is
definitely.
bringing people to
Yes,
the
yes.
bank as well.
Yes, we don't look at it as transactional. It's not
Yeah.
we're going to invest so much in this event or this exhibition so that we will have so many viewers, or so, as you were mentioning, branding. It's more, as we're saying, investing in the community. And I mean, most recently, the research that we're reading on the local context and the lack of appreciation and awareness and the value of art and culture. So that's also part of our story, how important that is to us, even as a bank. The founder, Father Michael Vella, in 1910, actually started with supporting arts and culture with publications, weekly publications, and supporting bank clubs. And we even do that today. So
Yes.
we really support in many different ways.
Yes, and you see the value in that, and
Most
that's
definitely.
that's very good. And in terms of this return on your investment, right? Most recently, we mentioned this case. There was this curious case of the Danish artist who produced 2 blank canvases for a museum in Denmark, arguing that he did nothing wrong, that his artwork was, in fact, him taking the money and producing these blank canvases. So it's a horror story for whoever is producing. So I wouldn't really wish that to anyone. But
No.
but is the argument valid there? And I turn to you, Melanie. Can the nothing be an artwork in this case? How do you make sure that you get what you paid for in terms of value?
Yes, in this case, I think it's a very powerful conceptual art piece, and I think even though the museum might feel that the money was stolen, in reality, I think the artist gave them a more powerful artwork than they requested.
Well, they're known now, so
Of
if
course,
you go
exactly.
there,
I mean, this
you're-
caused an avalanche of marketing for them and for the artist. And yes, of course, they want their money back. But On the other hand, even though they were angry at what they received, they still accepted it and exhibited it, and also,
Created a
took all the
story.
marketing from it. What I would do, since the artwork is hot at the moment, the artist is hot at the moment, the only way to do it is to go to auction.
Okay.
And
maximize on
yes,
that.
continue.
Working.
Of course, they would probably make a profit out of it. The artist will probably become a superstar artist overnight. And, it's a win-win-win-win situation. Or else because this museum is quite a minor museum from what I understood. So another thing that could be done is to sell the artwork to a major museum and still get the money back and continue a bit on the marketing. So maybe it's not a totally sad horror story in the end, but let's see how it will evolve. We don't know.
Yes, that's the interesting part. And one final question. So realistically, Rachel, you did mention this when you were speaking, but what is the value added of purchasing an artwork over time, right? Or supporting arts in this case?
From my personal experience, I think that one should buy an artwork that one falls in love with. So it's not a matter of who the artist is or how expensive the artwork is, but it should be something that you it really gives you something. Because, of course, if you have one has no clue, one should get advice. And of course, there are various artists that maybe are more of an investment than others, but in reality, no one knows what will happen. Actually, one funny or not funny, way of buying something, or how to decide how to buy something. If you're in a room and there are various artworks, and without seeing the price tag, you can, after having a look around, decide if you had to steal. We continue on the topic. Steal one artwork, which artwork would you steal? And when you decide, you have to analyze your decision and see what made you go for that particular artwork. And from there, you can maybe also deduct what you should aim at investing for, which means that's the kind of work that makes you maybe feel something more than any other artwork.
It's exactly what you said, Rachel, in the sense that it's linked to what you stand for, what your priorities are, and what you would like to achieve, perhaps. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Melanie, for joining us for this session of the Hangout. And we now move on to the feature for the session. We spoke to Howard Keats de Bono about the artist's responsibilities in setting prices and also the power of collective bargaining as well as fair remuneration.
When it comes to artists setting their prices in general, prior to entering into the market, whatever art form or craft they have to offer, I believe the first priority is knowing the market. So it starts with understanding what you're going to be part of. The market in general in Malta, although it's small, it's also very saturated. So with that in mind, one might be tempted to lower the prices to get the gig, the opportunity, whatever it is. And it really stems from the fact that truthfully everyone wants to be on that stage, right? It's like, for some people it's like it's my right to be on the stage, but it's not. It's down to having an audience who are ready to pay money for your performance. In most cases, I would say it doesn't start like that. It starts with having your art shared on a free platform. And then if it becomes serious, if there's a demand for you, then yes, that is where the gate money comes into it. So to rewind on this thought, I would say that the first thing is understanding where you fit in the market. Are you a beginner? Are you a mid-level artist, or are you someone who has a name and the name resonates with people, and therefore you should know what that means in terms of fee. In terms of someone starting up, let's say, let me just take that angle. someone starting up is the toughest thing to do. Nowadays, much more than before. I mean, if I had to compare the industry 10, 15 years ago, startup acts had the better chance to also have longevity. If startup acts today do get the gig, unfortunately, it's short term. It's not long term, and a lot of it is because there is no know-how how to understand that you need to build a loyal audience. A loyal audience means that you know who your demographic is, you know who you're targeting, and you understand their criticism and take it on and build on that. I always say you should highlight your strengths and try to hide your weaknesses, because everyone has both. So that's from the beginner's point of view. And how to put a fee on that. For example, if I had to take our association, MEIA, as an example, one of our go-to plans is to address the scalability of fees, we call it. So therefore, we need to address situations where the minimum fee of what artists should get paid, whether you're a dancer, you're an actor, whether you're a musician, singer, whatever it is, in view of the saturated market, of course, being realistic, but also because I don't think there's any knowledge about that. So you do end up with people selling themselves short and therefore then damaging the industry. And you do also end up with people who leave a bitter taste, in a way, on the person who might have engaged them. So they would have bluffed their way, saying, oh, you're going to have a full house, you're going to do well, whatever. But then ultimately what happens is they don't have a full house. They don't do well, they won't book them again, and it leaves a bad name to for the rest of the industry. So now when the next act comes along asking for what is probably a reasonable price for them, then the promoter or the organizer will shoot it down because of their bad experience. So there is a bit of both one needs to take into account. So one of the roles that MEIA will be having, I would say, after our very, very challenging journey so far, dealing with more funding from the government and understanding the pandemic and how it hits, etc., how it hits the industry, is what happens next. And one of the flaws is, one of the problems is actually fees. So we are after this collective, I would say, scenario where everyone is on the same page and understanding, look, you're a startup level artist, this is what you need to charge. Bil-Malti ngħidu nevitaw ix-xogħol prekarjat. That's the truth. Some people, when you look at their hourly rate, it ends up being ridiculous amount of money. And we will scale it accordingly. So, I always say, MEA or any association shouldn't be there, or a union shouldn't be there to impose what we charge, but it should be there to recommend certain baseline, I call them baseline fees, where it's fair for both parties, and it gives, I would say, a sense of education as well as to what to expect, and from both sides of the spectrum. This collective scenario, truthfully, is based upon lots of feedback from MEA having all the different sectors. We understand the ones which have it more difficult than others. We understand that, and it's all relative. It's all relative down to how many opportunities one gets versus it's output versus input. So it's also will be based upon a template contract, what to expect, what you're actually going to be commissioned for, and identifying key points, which maybe for some people are taken for granted, for some others aren't. And I, wearing a manager's hat here, I'm probably one of the few artist managers in Malta. It dawned on me about 20 years ago when I decided to do this, that I was working and producing artists, and then they fizzle out. And I kept on saying, but why does this happen? And my experience was dealing a lot with international artists and being in other territories and understanding that the basic principles of valuing your art never existed on this island. They never did. It's to the point that one feels that they're doing you a favor because they're booking you for something. And that dominoes into the artists feeling belittled and not even valuing their own art. So, you end up with that situation. So we want to, without a doubt, highlight that reality. And yes, you need to value the art. You as an artist, you as an organizer, as a promoter, you as a consumer. Because it's threefold. It's the artist, the organizer or promoter, and the consumer. And that triangle needs to be on the same page. It does boil down to education, awareness, and having professionals speak out, share their struggles, share their experiences, and what we will be proposing is a consensus on all that, a gathering of thoughts, and proposing way forward and recommendations that everyone feels protected, and at the same time that it can also have a sense of longevity, not short term, because if you aim too high and there is no market for it, then it's going to implode anyhow. So one of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that whether we like it or not, culture for some people is not a priority. From a consumer aspect, right? I would say that we have lost a big chunk of our audience. I dare say that at the moment we stand that whatever you do, you will not get more than 3,000 people, no matter whatever you do. That's where we stand on. We used to have audiences before 20,000 people. So that's going to be a long-term struggle to get to that point. When an audience come to an event, one needs to understand it's an experience. It's not just to sit there and listen or see the act, but it's a whole experience. And that experience you can't buy online. We tried, globally, the world tried its best in the pandemic to try and offer a solution through digital forms, but we all know it doesn't work. Maybe temporarily, but it doesn't work on the long term because people want that experience. The whole gathering of it in itself is an experience, that you're all experiencing this thing together through the whole feeling of it, ups and downs, and the whole journey is an experience. And for the audience perspective, that consuming that art has a value. So I would say more than anything else, the artist needs to be respectful to the audience, or just as much as the audience needs to be respectful to the artist. Because you have to do your utmost to have an amazing show. You can't cut corners. If you're going to do that, then you're going to expect to have a domino effect where that audience will not be loyal, they won't come to your next show. Probably it will also hurt that audience to go to other shows as well. That's God's honest truth. I use the example of Seattle when there was the whole grunge scene. It didn't start from one act. It started from a lot of acts. That's how you create a scene. And in Malta there's this tendency of, I would say this small island mentality where there's competition between people who do well, and instead of encouraging and nourishing that, you end up going against each other. It doesn't work that way. The more great acts there are, the more audiences are going to grow. And we've seen that because our industry peaked in 2019. We've seen that happen. And we want that to happen again. And it happened because of all these things. One problem there was that we were having a lot of free events. So, and mostly by the government, but not only. I am against free events. I am not against a one-off, 2 events in a year, because I believe, yes, that as a nation we should give something on that level. But when it's too frequent, then we have a problem. So understanding that value is a fact. And I can tell you one last thing from experience. The higher the ticket, the highest tickets are the ones that go first. So that means that the audience, that is something, this is like God's honest truth from all these 20 years. So people want a good service back. You will not get a second chance. If you get it wrong, they will not come again. But those tickets at higher price sell first, probably because they expect that you're going to have something good for them. That's my experience. I'm just going to conclude with this point. My experience as an artist manager. I start with acts. Their fee is probably a couple of hundred, 200, 300 euros. And my job is to push that up to the thousands. And I've always managed to do that with one thing in mind, which is crucial, that when I'm dealing with the organizer, with the promoter, you can't be greedy. So if you value the act as, say, X amount, you need to make sure that the promoter is going to make a profit as well. You always have to keep that in mind at all costs, that there is enough money left for the organizer to pay the bills of the sound, of the lights, and have some profit so that he'll book you again. That is a simple mindset. Have a fee that leaves enough money, not that you're cutting yourself short, because the next time you're going to have a full house, you're going to then add your price a little bit more. And it keeps on going that direction, keeping in mind that there's always room left for the promoter to make some money. I think that's crucial.
We now welcome Elaine Abela, theatre practitioner and director, and Pamela Kerr, freelance dance practitioner. Welcome to this session. We're going to be discussing again here the value of art and pricing. So when it comes to performing arts, pricing can be somewhat difficult, somewhat subjective, and a little bit risky perhaps at times, particularly if audience members perhaps do not feel that they had a good experience. So how do you feel about the statement, and what's your experience in relation to this subject? Perhaps we can start with you, Leanne.
I think it depends on the point of view. If you see it from the point of view of the artist, obviously, when you put up a production, there are so many expenses that even like a price tag, when you hear 20 euros for a performance, you're like, lol, it's too expensive. But actually, it's not from the artist's point of view, because there are even, the theatre venue, and then when you start, like, for example, we devise a lot of projects. So when you start devising, you start off with a little, project. You need maybe few light cues, some props, and you're okay at the start, but
yes,
after a month of devising, you end up with a big project. And that is when you start realizing that the pricing needs to shift or needs to reflect the expenses that you're having during the show. So, yeah, I understand that from an audience point of view, especially people who don't go to the theatre, a price tag of 20 euros is very expensive. And I understand that. I remember, we used to start off with like 10 euros, used to be kind of the go-to.
Exactly, up till a few years ago.
Yeah, it was a go-to price, wasn't it? But now, 20, 25 euros, it's not pricey. Obviously, having said that, when I look at theatre that we've done, for example, in the streets, I don't think we should put a price tag to theatre in the streets, because that is where theatre started from, and I think we should cherish things. We should cherish roots, and not put a price tag on everything, because I think there's extremes as well. First we start off doing everything for free, and now we're putting a price to everything. So it's nice to find a bit of a balance, where the audience find performances which are 5 euros, 10, 20, 25, free stuff, 100 euros. So you give opportunity to different audiences to experience different genre of theatre.
Also, perhaps depending on how that is supported, because the artist still needs to be paid, and it's still work, right?
Yes,
so
that's something we're still struggling with.
Exactly. Pam,
in fact, I think what I think a client so to speak, needs to bear in mind whether your client is the audience or whether it is a producer, you know, putting a price tag to your production in general and selling the production to a theatre possibly. I think what one needs to keep in mind is that you are not, the value isn't of that 1 hour performance that you are seeing, but it is of a process. And the process, one has to keep in mind, starts way before the performance date, possibly months, if not sometimes even possibly a year before. You know, you have to keep in mind there's the research which happens before the performance, so the time that the director or the creator comes up with a concept. So even that in itself is a value, you know, the concept and how to develop the concept. So the what we would call the intellectual property, you know, of the creator has to have a value. So starting off from there, and possibly, and then also involving your collaborators. So, for example, in my case, meeting with musicians or composers, dramaturgs, and involving the people involved in your production, so professionals in their own right. So that is a lot of work which is done prior to even entering a studio. And working with, in my case, would be with the dancers, who are professionals in their own right. So if I am working with 5, 6 professional dancers and I have 4 weeks work, then calculate a 4-week salary, professional salary, and that is the amount that they need to get paid. And then obviously the costs are put together, like Leanne was saying, and it is divided into how many seats you have in the theatre. Ultimately, everybody's working to make a profit. I mean, it's important to stress that we do not enter a studio because it is a hobby, so it's okay whether we make a profit or loss or break even. No, there is a value to it, a professional value to it, and this is how we must be looking at it to give it the value that it deserves and to be working at a profit. Obviously, I agree with what Leanne was saying, that we have a different target audience, you know what I mean? So once you sit down at your research stage, you are thinking of your audience. Who is my audience? Is this an outreach project where I am doing it to attract as many people as possible so that maybe I instill, so for example, like a lot of children's performances which are vital for us to be able to build this culture of theatre, you know what I mean? So what am I looking at there? How am I going to price that? Because I do want, and obviously yes, we do have to make it accessible, but without lowering our standard and the value of what art really is, you know, because there is a lot of time and energy, like in any other professional job, you know, that goes into this work.
And there's a lot of, the process is hidden as such. It's not something which you see.
This is why I said it's important to realize that there is a process that leads to that 1 hour performance, because some people will tell you what, X amount for 15 minutes choreography. No, but obviously 15 minutes choreography is not 15 minutes of work. It is hours of work, you know.
But I think when it comes to the audience, I think all the blood, sweat and tears is never seen. We never showed that bit. I think then the skill in a way is to show the audience that actually they can do it themselves. The audience sometimes sit and they can say, "Lalo, it's beautiful, Lalo. I can actually do that." Well, actually, you can't do that. I mean, we're making it look really
very
easy,
simple,
so pleasant. Okay, but you don't know how many bones I broke. Okay, how many shoes I tore. As that, you know. So yes, sometimes that works against us. You know, that we are trying to make it look really easy and pleasant and enjoyable. But
if I may add to that, it's true. However, I do genuinely hope that people will start to understand the difference between a professional performance who ultimately reaches that level of being able to be at ease and yes, hopefully be able to instill so much emotion in the audience that they are able to believe that they can possibly do it themselves, or that they have entered that journey themselves, which you are trying to convey, and between the amateur world. And that is something which is also very important for a client. And I say a client because your client could be the audience if I decide to put up a production privately, or it could be a theatre, you know. to understand the difference between having professionals do the work and between having amateurs doing the work. And I hope we do have this distinction. This is like, for example, simple but still an art form. If I go buy a door, I go to a factory and it's mass produced, and then I have a carpenter who has actually done it. Chances are the carpenter's is more expensive, but if I had to see it, I can understand why, you know.
But Pam, if I may, in this context where the lines between the amateur professional are very blurred, you know, because there are perhaps different levels of engagement with the art. So how do you make that distinction? Right. Well, as long as it's a good production, you can perhaps make a distinction between a good production and a production which is not perhaps of standard. But at the same time, this starting off from professional versus non-professional, it's a bit more subjective.
Yes, it is a very
or difficult.
No, I wouldn't personally. I wouldn't say it's subjective, and I think anyone who understands in the field. So, for example, if I had to watch a dance performance, I think today, with so much experience, I think you can easily tell whether it is a professional performance or an amateur one. Like I assume the same would go for Leanne when it comes to theatre. There are many, there's, you know, the detail which says it all. You know what I mean? My biggest worry is, can everyone see that? And the people who engage the production, are they able to distinguish between a professional and an amateur? Because that obviously the pricing there, the value is completely different, and I do not expect someone amateur to be charging the same amount as someone professional. And by that I do not mean it could be a very good performance, you know what I mean? I'm not judging a standard, but someone who spends a full-time work day, 9 to 5 in a studio, creating work and working on a performance, to someone who does it for 1 hour a day is very different. You know, it's the saying, without quantity of time, there is no quality of work. You know, I mean, quality and quantity of time go hand in hand.
So what do you think is the artist's responsibility here? And earlier we mentioned also the relationship with producers that are also perhaps funding or giving a set fee for your performance, for your participation in a project. So what is the artist's responsibility? Should he kind of go for all kinds of prices, or should there be some form of consensus?
I think if you're doing it professionally, you can't go for every project. There's no way in hell, or else you won't survive. I think if you're doing it for a living, you have to really weigh what you're doing in terms of quality, in terms of pricing. I mean, you have to put a fee, and it's really hard sometimes because we don't have a set fee. So when you have a project in your hand, first of all, you need to ask what the script is about, who you're going to work with, rehearsals. Is it going to be from Monday till Sunday? I mean, we work from 9 till 5 every single day, and we don't have any other job that we go to because this is the job. So one finding, for example, to have somebody to tell you, you know, we change contract or we change the fee in the middle of the project. I mean, that is crazy, because when you go to a doctor and he gives you his fee, you don't ask the doctor, yeah, but you know, can you give me half the medicine and I half survive this? No, you just, you know, you don't question, you pay. So yeah, we were struggling with this, but I think in terms of artists, yeah, we always have to weigh, being a full-timer, you always have to weigh what you have in your hands. And you can never say yes to each production that comes along. You need to say, hey, this is my standard, this is my fee. It changes according to the standard of living. And this is what I produce. This is what you know, this is my level. This is where I'm at. You either join me or you don't work with me anymore. You know, the world is huge. It's not a problem. There's always an opportunity. So I think it's first it's an inner journey, and then you give it out to to the universe,
Whoever
and
you're
you work.
working with.
Yeah, you work with the same vibrations. Whoever is on your same frequency.
Yes, I agree. I mean, you have to set a value to your work and you must keep it. I mean, of course, it's not easy. I mean, Leanne brought the example of the doctor. You go to the doctor, you feel sick, you have to go. With us, it's maybe possibly more of a luxury in terms
But
of...
is it a luxury?
That's
Even on
why
the
I say
Titanic,
it.
when they were dying, they had music playing. So
I say it a bit skeptically, you know what I mean? Can you do without it?
we
I
do
don't
need
know.
it, though. We need it.
Yes.
Our soul needs.
I feel the same, but does everyone feel that way? I don't know. It's questionable. But yes, of course, I
Possibly it's
see
also taken for granted as well. So
Yes,
it's there, but
yes,
it's
yes, but yes, no, you have to put a value, and it's important to put a value, and it is important that each and every single body who works in the field puts a value to the work, because if X doesn't, then it's bringing down my value. You know what I mean? And this is very dangerous. And I
Exactly.
see this happening, which is why I say it, and it angers me. At the same time, I feel there is a lot of education that still needs to be done, even within our sector. You know what I mean? So we are talking about our clients, we are talking about the audience, we are talking about theatre people, producers, etc. But what about the people who work in the industry and are ready to sell it so cheaply?
yes.
You know, I mean, for me, that's a fundamental problem, because obviously it has lowered my standard, and I am not ready personally to lower my standard, because there has been a lot of time and effort which I have invested in studying my art and my craft, let alone coming to the point where Leanne mentioned, you know what I mean, the sweat, the blood, and the theatres that are happening while I'm working. But before that, there has been endless years of studying, which I wouldn't like to bring down to nothing, you know what I mean?
So in this case, because we did, I think at one point, we did mention standards or standardization. Now it's very, very difficult to standardize prices in a free market, right? And
Yes.
perhaps it's not correct even to mention that. But how do you create effective pricing strategies? As in, do you feel that there is need for some sort of guidelines, for some sort of reference point, so that fees are more fair?
So in terms of pricing, we're not talking about ticket sales. We're much more talking about fees and
Yes.
from the artist's point of view.
Yes.
I mean, when I was in London, there used to be a price point. In London, there was this union that used to
Yes.
safeguard our jobs. You know, it is called equity, and this is something that we haven't even touched here in Malta. And I feel that we need to go there and we need to start talking about it, because unions like equity and you know, the way it works in London is that there's a standard fee that you need to get paid weekly if you're working full-time in a project. This is not rocket science, you know, I'm talking like this is super basic life skills, okay? So when you go into a production, imagine you have an artist who doesn't know how to price themselves, okay? At least there's this union that tells you, hey, listen, okay, no stress, 500 euros a week, start off with that. If it goes, you know, five weeks, you get this and that,
Yes.
you know, and that's your base. That's your base. You have something to fall back on. And then if you feel that you have more knowledge and expertise, you can go to a producer and tell him, listen, yeah, I want that basic pay, but then I want an extra 200 because I bring this to the table. You know, so yeah, I do feel we need to get to a point where there is a basic sum which get paid every week to a full-timer. Yes, we need to go there because it's not easy to price it.
Exactly.
It gets easier by time because every time you do a project, you realize you are, okay, like that, you know, so you're learning every time. But we have so many full-timers now, you know, we're not in the Stone Age anymore. Now we went, we studied, you know, we became professionals and we're here. We're full-timers. So, yeah, why not have a set of rules, of basic rules? I'm not talking
As a guideline.
a guideline to say, okay, basic, this is the basic, all right? We don't even need to discuss it. If you're gonna approach me to work on a project, That's the basic.
That needs to be there.
Exactly. We don't even need to sign any contracts. That's the basic. No stress. But then if I bring something else to the table, if I'm bringing an extra talent, okay, then yeah, we discuss, we revise that basic sum.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that is where we need to go at this point.
Yes, I do agree that there needs to be some sort of guidelines. One possibly again for also for the people who are starting out to have a bit of an idea of how this could work. One, like I said before, not to lower their value and not to lower the value of the art in general.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Which is, again, like I said, fundamental. Also, I think it's good because not only from the artist point of view, but even for the people who are commissioning the work, they have an understanding of how much that work actually is worth.
And they can price and they can budget. And so it's kind of reflects.
To be honest, sometimes I feel my biggest problem, because we started off this conversation talking about the audience. I'm not exactly sure if the audience is the biggest problem. Sometimes I feel it's people who are commissioning the work who are the problem in terms of not understanding the value of what they are really commissioning. I'm not saying everybody, but you still find a lot of people who are commissioning work and who lack an understanding of what me as an artist, what I'm actually budgeting for.
What is involved.
And what is involved,
work.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is where the discrepancy lies. So this guideline kind of, I think, would give a clearer picture to both sides of the table, really, not just to...
But let's say someone who is approaching us, for example, to give us a work, they don't understand the work. Okay, I respect that. Okay, not everyone understands the word. But if we're being commissioned, and the person who is giving us the commission to work doesn't understand the industry, that is even more, that is where you need to be in a position of really trusting that the artists know what they're doing, you know?
Yes.
So as a commissioner who doesn't understand the job, you cannot dictate to me how much it involves.
But I still feel that there relies a problem there.
Yes, and that is the problem. I should be telling you how much it costs and how much it worth.
Exactly.
How much
in the same way it works for everything else.
Yes,
Like if I go
exactly.
to buy a product, I know.
Because most of the time, people who approach us to do the work, they're not doing it. Some of them, you know, except for producers.
Very few, in fact, if I may say.
You know, so yeah, I think there's a lot of reworking and rewiring of the neurons of our brains that need to, you know, be reassessed.
Yes.
For me, my biggest concern, for example, is the education, you know. If children are not being equipped, you know, and experienced, they need exposure, they need to be exposed to dance, they need to be exposed to theater and to the arts, you know, looking in front of a painting for an hour. You need to be exposed. If you're not exposed at a young age, it's really hard to do it when you're older. It's hard. You know, when I look at my parents, I don't see my father looking at a painting, you know, it's late, it's too late.
That's from
You know?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're young and you already have it in your muscles, you know, you already have it in your bones, then it's a muscle memory thing.
Yes.
You grow up and you just enjoy being at the Tate for 5 hours.
There is certainly much more to say about pricing, about artist fees, and about the subject. I really hope that this session creates some form of debate around the subject, and perhaps also solutions can be put forward, can be presented, and can be discussed among artists, among producers. I thank you, Leanne, for being here. Thank you, Pam, for joining us today. That brings today's session to conclusion. I would like to thank all the participants who joined our session. Feel free to leave any comments. As I said before, it's important that a conversation is generated, a discussion is generated around the subject. So feel free to leave any comments in the comment section below. See you very soon for another session of the ACM Hangouts. Thank you very much.